Thank you for joining us for the first CREtech Climate webinar. My name is Lena Shapiro, and I'm an analyst at CREtech, as well as a senior at USC studying real estate development. I'm fortunate enough to be joined today by an incredible set of leaders who have each proactively led initiatives to address climate change through their respective roles. We've seen how in the past years, the case for adopting a more sustainable built world has expanded beyond a moral obligation to one required by regulators, capital markets, and tenants. Yet the overall industry remains rather inept to face the demand and aggressive targets. So through our discussion today, we will further the case for decarbonizing the built world and learn about the strategic ways that we can feasibly adopt meaningful solutions. So with that, I'll turn it over to our host and Director of Events, Bethany.
Thanks, Lena. Lena really put together this webinar, so thank you so much for your leadership. It's so inspiring to have you as part of the team. So welcome everybody to our inaugural event with CREtech Climate. We're so thrilled you are here. This has been a long time coming, and I'm so excited about the content we have for you today. Typically at this point of the webinar, I would show you a slide about all of our upcoming events, but this is our only event we really have on the calendar right now. So I'd love for you to reach out to me at events@cretech.com and let us know what you want us to talk about. We'd love to have some new faces and voices up on the stage with us. So that's events@cretech.com. Love to hear what you want us to be talking about. So this is also going to be a really interactive session. At the end, I'll be moderating an audience Q&A. So don't leave me hanging. I need some questions there. So you can use the chat or the Q&A feature, and we'll get to as many of those at the end of the show. So let me turn it over to our CEO of CREtech and CREtech Climate, Mike Beckerman, to get things started. Thank you.
Thanks, Bethany, and wonderful job, Lena, on the introduction. I'm so glad you're part of the team. So thank you, everybody, for joining today. If I could just take a few minutes, we have a big group, a wonderful, fantastic group of very accomplished, esteemed professionals in the world of real estate technology, sustainability, climate. But if I could just take a few minutes just to sort of set the table and frame the discussion and talk a little bit about why am I doing this, right? Why am I here today? Why are you all here? But let me just make it personal for me. The first thing I'll say is, why am I not doing this? I mean, I'm not doing this for the money. There's far easier ways for our company to grow revenue than what we're doing right here. So that's not the issue for us. That's not my focus. This is not some PR bullshit that I'm doing to greenwash or to check a box to say, let's do something on sustainability because it seems cool, it seems trendy. That's not why I'm doing it. I'm doing this because for three primary reasons. One, it's moral for me, right? It's personal. As Bethany will show, the real estate industry is an industry I love. I've been in it my whole entire life, 35-year career in real estate. It's been really great to me and my family. I have many great friends, but it's also got to wake up to its culpability in its impact on climate change. And I believe in science. I believe in the data. And what it says is that our industry is the single largest contributor of climate change. And when I learned that fact just recently, unfortunately, it was astounding to me. I always assumed, oh, it's got to be transportation. It's got to be many, many other industries. No, it's fact. It's real estate. So for me, it is very personal. I care about the environment. I believe in the science. I live on a farm, and I'm going to make a difference here and make an impact. Number two is the marketplace, right? The marketplace is going to converge on our industry, and they're going to put the spotlight on the real estate sector as its relationship to climate change. And so for me, also having a big platform in CREtech and a big voice, I'm going to do something about it because the marketplace, tenants, residents, consumers, government, they're all going to converge on our industry, and they're going to want to know, what are we doing about it? How are we addressing it? That's my job, to help lead the way. I'm not going to do it all myself, obviously. I'm blessed that we have some incredible supporters, some incredible sponsors, RXR, Oxford, Savills, EY, Lennar. But the world's going to converge on our industry, and we've got to get out in front, and that's my job. The third reason for wanting to do this and why it's so important to me is financial, but it's for different reasons. One, there's going to be a price to pay by the industry if we don't get in front of this and tackle this head on. You're starting to see it in places like New York and Los Angeles and other cities around the world. By not decarbonizing, there's going to be financial penalties for the built world. And we got to address that soon. But there's also great upside, right? It's fact that, you can command more higher rents, green buildings trade higher. These are facts. So there's also, while there's financial risk, there's great financial upside here as well. So that's why I'm doing it. I hope that those that are listening to this and watching this will get involved. They'll help. They'll join the cause. If you're a startup, if you're a professional that works in the industry and you want to get engaged, if you're a real estate company, if you're a technology provider, please join us. We need all the help we can get. So I'll get off my soapbox, but I'm so thrilled to be hosting this webinar today, and for all the participants that we've assembled, really a world-class team. So what I'd like to do is just go around the room, the virtual room, have these wonderful professionals who are far more accomplished and have just tremendous expertise in this field to help us, sort of all of us that are new to the cause, to the movement, to get educated, to understand what we can be doing and where the opportunities are. So with that, let me go around the room and ask everybody for a minute or two introduction of who you are, what you've been doing, and what you're doing today. And I'm excited for this discussion. So let me start first with you, Greg. Greg Smithy's a partner at Fifth Wall. If you could join and introduce yourself.
Fantastic. No, thanks very much, Michael. And also thanks to the rest of the CREtech and CREtech Climate teams for pulling this together. This is a very important subject that we should all be talking about. Yeah, 30 seconds on myself. I'm a partner at Fifth Wall. I look after Fifth Wall's climate tech fund here, and a little background on Fifth Wall. Fifth Wall is the world's largest venture capital fund focused on the built environment. We've got about $1.5 billion under management. And then prior to this, I came by way of Elon Musk world, where I was at the Boring Company digging tunnels and building mass transportation systems, and also at Neuralink, where we were putting microchips in people's heads. And prior to that, I was at Battery Ventures for a long time doing industrial tech.
That's terrific. I love the chips in people's heads reference. That's my favorite. That's terrific. And next, Mark Grinnis of EY, who's a tremendous supporter of CREtech and CREtech Climate, and great personal friend. And they've done just, have had a tremendous impact on our ecosystem at large. So Mark, if you could introduce yourself.
We feel strongly the exact same way that these are really important issues and really important. Our tagline at EY is building a better working world, and we absolutely believe that it's critical for a culture in our organization that we really embed some of the philosophies and thoughts and actions that you discussed. I'm Mark Grinnis. I run the real estate business for EY. EY is a $33 billion company. We have offices, obviously, all around the world. We service, all of the Fortune 500 and companies in every aspect. Say half of our business is probably audit and tax, and the other half of our business is consulting, strategy, and transaction related. We are deeply engaged in driving long-term value for our clients, and the sustainability initiative is front and center as we approach going forward and coming up with new solutions. So thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Mark. Wonderful. Can't thank EY enough for all of your support. Marta Shantz, our good friend, who's a senior vice president at the Greenprint Center at ULI. And Marta is and ULI are some of the people that I look to really get educated about all things sustainability, ESG, and climate, because they've been doing such good work for such a long period of time. So Marta, if you could introduce yourself to everybody, that'd be terrific.
Introduced me for myself. It was great, Michael. But hi, everyone. My name is Marta Shantz. As Michael mentioned, I'm the Senior Vice President at the Urban Land Institute, specifically with our Greenprint Center for Building Performance. For those of you who aren't familiar with ULI, we are a global real estate industry group. We've got 45,000 individual members worldwide, and we have a mission to shape the future of the built environment for transformative impact in communities worldwide. Basically, we just want cities to be the best they can be. And so logically, technology and sustainability and climate and ESG are all just such important parts of the work that we do. Personally, I started my career at the US Department of Energy and moved into the consulting world on the energy side of things with Booz Allen and a boutique firm called Waypoint Energy. And then I landed at ULI a handful of years ago, very much focused on real estate and sustainability and that kind of cross section, which is so important these days. So happy to be here and looking forward to talking more soon.
Thanks, Marta. Michael Glad, Vice Chairman, North American Head of Project Management, Macro, a Savills company. Michael's been a real passionate supporter, and I think it literally was one of the first ones that raised his hand on LinkedIn and said, whatever you're doing on climate, sustainability, ESG, we're in. So Michael, thanks again for the support, and love to have you introduce yourself to the group.
Thank you, and it doesn't stop today, Michael. So today is just another milestone, right? So yes, I'm Michael Glad. I'm Vice Chairman at Savills. I head up project management for North America. For those of you who don't know, Savills is one of the world's leading real estate services firm. We have 600 offices and 39,000 employees across the globe. And today's topic, as Michael was just telling you, is very important to us, most notably sustainability and ESG. It's at the center, the forefront of our conversations internally, our offices globally, as well as our conversations with our clients. So as we help them handle their transactions, we help them plan, design, construct, and operate the built environment. We're helping them do that with these new expectations. And today, we're excited to be here, and we plan to share some of those experiences with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Wonderful. Last but not least, Stacy Smedley of Building Transparency. Not only just a wonderful thought leader, one of the coolest people I've met in my journey, and just a real inspiration. So Stacy, if you could introduce yourself to the audience.
Sure, happy to, and thanks for including me today. My name is Stacy Smedley. I started actually on the architecture side. That's how I was trained, and I thought that I could design our way out of the climate crisis by designing green buildings. The most recent firm was KMD Architects for a number of years. Then I moved to Skanska, where I thought I could build our way out of the problem by building green buildings. And that's been the last 7 years in their USA building group at Skanska, really supporting all green initiatives across the company's construction portfolio. And then the hat I'm literally and figuratively wearing today is as the executive director of Building Transparency, which is a one-year-old nonprofit organization that I call a software tech nonprofit startup, where our core focus is to create the free open access tools and data necessary to actually reduce embodied carbon emissions of construction in the built environment. So that's what I'll be talking about today, hopefully.
Terrific. I hope to get one of those hats one of these days. One of these days.
Yes, sir. We can do that.
We have a plan. We have a plan. We have a plan. We're going to get those hats to a wide audience. So let's unpack the conversation though for the audience, then everybody. What I'd love to do is just sort of go around the room and give you each a few minutes to unpack sort of thoughts around this. Let's make the case for this massive built world as to why they should be investing in climate, tech, sustainability, ESG initiatives, how, where do we start, and where? Like practically, where do we go? Where do we put the investment dollars? What are some of the actions that we could launch on our company's behalf? Because I think our industry, obviously, they're like me, we're late to the game, but we're here. So help educate us. So Greg, if we could start with you, sort of from the venture perspective, right? From Fifth Wall's perspective, you've got this new climate fund. I think it's $300 million fund. I don't know if I got that right, but tell us why, for you, why Fifth Wall focusing on climate? Where are the opportunities you think you're going to be investing in? And where do you see this climate tech taking shape in the built world?
Yep, absolutely, and you're correct. Yes, it's a $300 million fund, focus exclusively on climate tech around the built world. I will take a very ruthless capitalistic point of view, right? Given that I'm the one vulture capitalist here on the call. But if you just take sort of venture capital 101, is you should chase large markets because a sort of bad company in a large market will beat a good company in a small market, pretty much every day of the week. When we look at this market as what the large opportunity is, you've got to think of real estate as the largest asset class in the world, right? $270 trillion. We build on the order, depending on the year, somewhere between $3 and $8 trillion of new buildings every single year, right? So in terms of a size of a marketplace for new technologies around decarbonization, when this market wakes up and decides that they really, frankly, need to decarbonize, we're probably looking at the largest venture capital opportunity in the history of the world. And I say that without being bombastic, because if we look at, say, the size of the entire internet market, right, all e-commerce, everything combined, it's around about $1 trillion per year. If you look at the enterprise software market, which is traditionally where most venture capitalists have made their money, it's around about $800 billion per year. Whereas when we look at the technologies that will go into decarbonizing the built world, because this asset class is just frankly so large, we're estimating somewhere between $2 and $5 trillion of spend every year, obviously with some ramp up, but every year for the next 30 to 50 years. So just as maybe over the last 15 years, our best and brightest minds, very unfortunately, ended up spending all of their time going to the Googles and Facebooks of the world and working on advertising optimization. I'm seeing this as a massive opportunity for the greatest minds in this next generation to be working on something that's actually useful. And it is a massive, massive opportunity. And one just extra item I will add to this is I think we as an industry, when we're thinking about what are we investing in, really should understand the difference between implementation of existing technologies and investing in R&D for new technologies. And the reason why this is important is if you were, as a real estate owner or operator today, to go and buy the best technology that's available on the market, the best solar panels to go on the roof, the best installation, the best Energy Star compliance equipment, and switched all of your electricity to green electricity, it would roughly only hit about half of the carbon problem that the industry currently has, right? That 40% of greenhouse gases, it would only handle about 50% of it. So at the same time that we as an industry are thinking of investing in existing technologies by implementing them, for roughly every dollar we're putting out the door to implement existing technologies, we should also be putting $1 out the door into R&D for the new technologies that are going to solve the other half of that problem. But the final just point on it, largest venture capital opportunity in history, and I think we should all get excited about it.
That's great, Greg. Just a quick follow on to that. So in, I know you can't talk about things that, deals specifically, but where will Fifth Wall be putting its money conceptually in climate tech? What does that look like? If you could educate our audience as to the specific opportunities or categories.
Yeah, specific categories here. I think I like to think of the world in terms of two big buckets. There's boring climate tech and there's sexy climate tech, right? And the Boring climate tech is the stuff that is pragmatic, that you can install and buy today. And think of this as, like I mentioned, high efficiency HVAC motors, heat pumps, better insulated windows, solar roofs, all of these things that maybe we've heard a lot about them, but what we need to do to invest, and where a venture capitalist comes in, is taking some technology where a technology is maybe available on a small scale and giving those companies money to massively grow their ability to get product out to some of the largest buyers in the world. So a great example here is the first deal out of our fund, which we announced, Turntide Motors. They've got high efficiency HVAC motors. They're somewhere between 40 and 60% more efficient in the real world. CapEx payback periods on these motors are roughly 2 years, depending on your cost of the electricity. And then that motor sits in your building for 20 to 30 years, right? So it's kind of a no-brainer from the CFO's point of view. And you look at a company like this, and it seems very boring, but it moves the needle for owners and operators today. And the only thing that's holding back this technology is venture capital money to allow that company to expand so that they can expand into the demand that they have. So that's the boring stuff. But then at the same time, we have to look at some of the sci-fi stuff as well. So there, we're looking at things like new building materials. How do you reinvent concrete? How do you make steel that is clean? How do you make it so that CLT, I like the embodied carbon folks are all getting big nods here, right? How do you get mass timber so that it can be massively deployed, right? Double use on mass there. So think of those two buckets. Boring stuff you can implement right now, super pragmatic, and then some sci-fi stuff that's going to take a few years to bake, but we need it down the line.
Just quick one. So fifth wall, from what I've been able to glean, typically you're going a little bit later stage. Is that going to change at all with climate? Because a lot of these technologies are very young and early stage.
Yeah, so I think you could actually think in those two buckets by stage. So the boring stuff, right? Typically there is a product that exists and it's all about scaling that up. So there you would think of a slightly later stage. So here we're talking a B-ish round. We're cutting a 10, 15, $20 million check into that company as part of probably a 40 to 50, $60 million total round. Whereas the sci-fi stuff, we are taking science risk, right? And fundamentally, I think it's important for venture capital funds to be willing to take science risk on this stuff. Because a lot of these technologies, there's a gap of taking something from being in the lab to being at scale. And we as venture capitalists need to sort of fill that gap and get those technologies out of the lab.
Great. Thanks, Greg. Great insights. So thrilled that you've joined our industry, and really excited to see what's to come. Mark, you have such a unique vantage point because EY is such a massive company with a big footprint, right? And a lot of employees, Fortune 100 or probably, maybe even larger, right? So that's one vantage point. And the other is that you've got so many real estate clients, right, around the world. So tell us about your perspective, EY as a company, but then also as a thought leader in climate, ESG, sustainability.
No, thanks. And most importantly, Greg, thanks for going first on the capitalistic, covering that thoroughly. Greatly appreciated. I can be a little bit more kindler and gentler on that. But actually, to be honest, I completely agree with you, Greg, as far as the opportunity, and as a professional service firm, we see this as a huge industry and a huge opportunity to make a big impact. We are 350,000 people, Michael, as you mentioned, and we've got some 700-800 offices around the world. And we kind of started this journey in earnest a couple of years ago. As we really started to say, yeah, this is an emerging opportunity to advising clients, but we also looked at ourselves and looked in the mirror and said, we got a lot of work to do ourselves on before we start advising clients. It's interesting as you go into a company like ours and you say, well, how much do your people know about their carbon impact? And if they did, would they behave differently? How much do you generate from travel? And is all that travel necessary, to conduct business? And what are all your buildings, and are you running it most efficiently? And as you really go through and parse out all those elements that make up our organization, we really found areas where we could have just a huge impact. we've announced that we're going to go carbon negative this year, and then by 2025, carbon zero. And how are we doing that? We're looking at reducing our travel by 35%. We're looking at sourcing, having 75% of our customer base to have sustainability agendas in order to do as we engage with them. We're separately metering our buildings. We're managing and want to monitor that. Our biggest landlords were asking, where do you get your energy? Can we get renewable to it? We're going through our top 150 locations and addressing renewables for those 150 locations and how we can get that energy source in the building. So there's lots to this. There's lots at a people level. There's lots at an energy level. But a comprehensive approach is how we're looking at it and thinking that we can make really big changes to not only our organization but the industry we serve.
Terrific, Mark. I mean, that's where it starts, right? It starts with your own company, and a company as large and as innovative as EY, that sends a really powerful message throughout the entire business world. So, your leadership, your company's leadership is instrumental in us making a real change here. So wonderful, and thank you. Marta, from your perspective, and ULI and your group, that you do such wonderful research. It takes me a long time to get through it because I'm a little slow, and I got to reread it and ask my 15 and 13-year-old, what does this word mean? But how can you help us make this case? ULI is the leading global real estate organization. So how do we make the case to the industry at large? What have you seen or heard or written that's been effective that'll help us?
I'm so glad you asked. That's ultimately the remit of our research center that looks at climate mitigation. It's called Greenprint, like a blueprint for green buildings. And we are all about making the case for green buildings, right? Greg mentioned, and you did too, that huge portion of carbon emissions that buildings are responsible across the globe. And so real estate does have a responsibility to address that. Luckily, it also helps the bottom line. And so when we think about the business case for sustainability and climate mitigation, it's kind of fivefold the way that we look at it. First and foremost, the financials are there, especially for the boring energy efficiency side of things, right? Reducing your energy usage reduces your operating expenses, which increases your net operating income. You throw a cap rate on there, you've increased asset value simply by improving your energy efficiency in your asset. That's a no-brainer alone. Additionally, though, we're starting to see investors very much value more sustainable real estate funds. We're starting to see tenants ask for it, like Mark was saying about how EY is specifically asking their landlords for more sustainable space. We're starting to see non-energy benefits of sustainability, like resilience and grid reliability, when we start thinking about the whole interconnected system of buildings within cities. And also there's the regulation side of things. All of those are very nice carrots in the business case. And then we look at the stick, where cities and countries across the globe are launching some pretty aggressive goals and policies to support them that directly affect the building sector, whether that's in New York with local law 97 that has carbon emissions caps, whether that's in St. Louis that has set a building energy performance standard. The city of Vancouver has set an embodied carbon reduction goal for 40% reduction by 2030 on all new developments. We're seeing this across the globe, and real estate is starting to get smart and proactive so that they don't get bit in the butt when it gets too late. So by taking that business case into account and really thinking about why this is important for real estate beyond the simple financials, it helps.
Yeah, that's so helpful, Marta. And I would encourage everybody that's listening to this to go to the Marta's site. They've got extraordinary data, research, information, as Stacy does as well. So it's all there, to get educated. And Michael, I think that's a good segue in the sense that, like, one of the things we're going to hear from the real estate industry is, what's the ROI? Right? Like, that's for everything. I mean, we've seen it in the last 10 years in the real estate tech sector. What's the ROI? What's the ROI? You also have such a unique vantage point. I mean, Savills probably the largest global real estate services company representing tenants, all the work that you're doing on the project management side as well. So what are you seeing from your vantage point that'll give us hope and inspiration that perhaps the industry will embrace this?
I guess, first of all, I'm dealing with the reality of everything that my fellow panelists here have spoken about. I don't know if you intentionally put the sequence the way you did, but it kind of works very well for what we're doing. You know, Greg, from a funding standpoint, obviously what everyone else was saying here about these great ideas, and now we're talking about the technology, but I'd just like to start that I really think first and foremost, we should understand this is a human matter, big time, period. And 2020 was an unprecedented time for everyone. For my 5 daughters, for my 6 grandchildren, we all spoke about it a lot, and sustainability and saving the planet became a very big topic. So no matter where you lived in the past year, no matter what you did, the pandemic had a substantial impact on you. And I think that set a tone. It was kind of a wake-up call. That's the way I see it. I'm in the business now for 40 years. And I just think the wake-up call was how interdependent we are. We all have to work together at all levels. We have to tackle this as a global challenge, and we have to take it head on. So it's interesting that we're all coming together collectively here to talk about the different ways. And now we see that the federal government here is obviously prioritizing this and guidelines for building regulation. I think that's necessary to get some people in the private sector to really take it seriously. And the tools that I'm seeing right away here, AI, IoT, sensors, digital twinning, things like that, all over, the use of drones. And I think it's going to create a more transparent and measurable outcome, Michael. And I really think that's a big difference. I think that we're going to go from cradle to grave, more to cradle to cradle. We're going to see more reuse. We're going to see adaptive reuse. We're going to see more smart buildings. And I think that this is going to be critical. You mentioned, obviously about 39–40% of all carbon emissions come from real estate. So I think that's key. And we also see from an awareness standpoint, intelligent, healthy initiatives. We've been seeing for years how LEED has had an impact, and now WELL and FitWell and other certification programs. And I really think they're going to have a very, very positive impact on how we're going to have some collective action industry-wide. But the second part of the answer is really that this is good for business. Our clients recognize this at all levels when we receive an RFP for our services, for our involvement, and how we're going to help them meet these initiatives. Sustainability and ESG is a bigger picture. And it's not only as a result of the pandemic. What Greg had said, obviously, we've seen what BlackRock was predicting with their survey about investments in ESG-based initiatives. It's big, it's everywhere. And just, it's not only at Savills that we recognize the need for urgent action in our own company and with our clients, but now, as you know, and you see in the news, we have built and we're building some of the biggest headquarters, to your point, around the world. So specifically here, we see how Disney has set an incredibly responsible 2030 initiative. Comcast, I've been working with them for 15 years and their initiatives, and recently their headquarters in Philadelphia. And now one of the top AmLaw 100 firms, Greenberg Traurig, is one of the first firms and the first major law firms who certified under certain guidelines to meet their Green E program. So I think that these names, just to name a few, are showing that people are walking the talk.
Great, Michael. Thank you so much. It's a wonderful perspective. Stacy, you wear so many different hats, literally, and I love it. So how do we make sure, right? And this is where you're helping me so much, all of you, that we're not just greenwashing this conversation, right? Like for me, I'm coming back tomorrow and the next day, and we're going to be here, and this whole group's going to keep coming back and coming back, but you're on the front lines of this. And you've seen so many different perspectives from the construction to architectural. How do we make sure the industry just doesn't greenwash this and say, yep, we're doing something, it's good enough. And we act with a great sense of urgency to meet some of these critical dates.
Sure. Yeah, I think, Michael, I love how you start talking about transparency. I think that's one of the key aspects of all of this is that there's a saying that, in our circles, I hear all the time, which you can't manage what you don't measure. And we need to have the open, transparent data that's based on science that supports all of these things that we're saying we're going to do when it comes to efficiency reductions and emissions reductions of material manufacturing in the supply chain. So I think aligning around that need for transparency is something that we're starting to see. I've designed buildings for clients, and I've helped build buildings for clients in the real estate space. And what seems to be happening right now, and I think that, again, Michael's point about the pandemic bringing us more together, is that the competition's going away, and there's this sense of coming together and sharing data, sharing commitments, Amazon's climate pledge commitment that anyone can sign on to and be a part of to drive towards a similar target from a carbon reduction standpoint. We're seeing that, building transparency started as something that was an incubated project that Skanska funded. Microsoft jumped on to test the tool. It's an embodied carbon calculator that's free for anyone. They're not funding it to make money. They're funding it to actually make it available for everybody and create a common standard and alignment around that. Our boards, the real estate professionals on the sustainability side from Salesforce, Facebook, Google, Amazon, and Microsoft coming together to want to support free open access data. So I can't emphasize that enough of just kind of moving past competition to alignment and transparency. I also think that there needs to be investment in the data. So it's great to invest in the products or materials that are the outputs that can meet these goals, but you've got to be able to calculate that very efficiently so that when someone reports on their reductions, the data is there to support it, and then spurring more investment into these materials that can actually meet the requirements. So invest in the data, make the data open and transparent, align on the commitments and the science behind the data.
That's great. No, we're following your lead, my friend, because we're at CREtech Climate. We're going to try and go out into the marketplace with a lot of those strategies that you're talking about. This was terrific as an intro to CREtech, to climate tech, sustainability, ESG. Let's just go around quickly. Let's talk to the audience now, and Bethany will jump in because there's a lot of questions, and I want to leave time for it. Greg, talk to the audience. So the audience, our audience at CREtech and CREtech Climate, it's a lot of landlords, it's a lot of real estate owners, it's a lot of big real estate companies, regionally, globally. What's your advice? How do they get started? Where's day one? What do we do? What do they do? Give them some advice, and let's just jump in around the table on that one.
Yeah, here's my quick one, and I'll go back to the ruthless capitalism. Is realize that ESG and sustainability is actually core to your business, right? Fundamentally, you cannot move buildings. So I think a lot of people say, hey, look, a building is worth a lot less if it's underwater or on fire. You should check my math on that, right? But separately, there's this concept of stranded assets, but more from a financial point of view. And I'm meaning on the cost of capital. And so real estate is a heavily cost of capital driven business. And what we're seeing right now is a bifurcation between the cost of capital for green projects and quote unquote dirty projects, right? In 2017, you could raise debt on green projects around about 50 bips cheaper than you could on non-green projects, right? Today, that delta is much larger, and it's only growing, right? As the Larry Finks of the world say that their corporations are only going to put money into green projects. We've got hundreds of trillions of dollars that are only willing to invest in green buildings, right? So fundamentally, you have to realize that this is going to hit this industry right at the heart of what it is. Sustainability isn't some cute little thing you sort of tack onto the side. It actually is the fundamentals of how you run your business, that buildings that are clean and cheaper to finance, cheaper to run and operate, as a couple of other people saw, and it's just better for the business. And More importantly, especially for a lot of our publicly traded audience, is this is reflected in your stock prices as well. You know, you only have to look at the delta between Tesla's stock price and it being worth more than the 5 or 6 next largest car companies combined, right? Or if you think that that's all Elon Musk reality distortion field, look at something like Ørsted Energy, right? They pivoted, they were an oil and gas, Danish oil and gas company, pivoted to 100% wind power, green energy. They're now the largest wind power company in the world. Their stock is up 300% in the last 2-ish years, whilst all the rest of the oil majors are down on average like 20%, right? So you're going to see this on your cost of capital. You're going to see this in your stock prices. This is core to the business. It's not some cute little thing off to the side.
That's great. That's just absolutely great. Stacy, where does the real estate industry start? Give me some practical advice for our audience. I know I got to do something. What do I do?
So I like to use the analogy that learning about sustainability and what to do when it comes to our industry is kind of like learning a new language. So there's going to be folks that are already, very fluent, that can go and talk in these words that you probably heard on this call or me say earlier that you might not understand. There are those that may have a conversation that can actually, converse with somebody. And there's those who, can't yet understand anything that we're saying or anyone that the industry is saying on sustainability. So I think for me, it's okay to say that you're not fluent, that you just need to go get the, Sustainability for Dummies in Real Estate book. And that starts really, I think, Michael, exactly with what you're doing, where there's a list of resources that I think you're going to be able to help put together of a ton of places you can go to read and start to gain that fluency. And also, you don't have to get fluent on every dialect at once. You can pick one. And it's okay if that's the place where you start. If operational efficiency or materials innovation or one of those things interests you, start with the one that you're going to be able to really dig into and stick with to get fluent in that dialect, then move to the next one. So I think I don't want to list off all the resources here, but I committed to help create that list to share with Marta and others.
Great. No, it's wonderful advice. Great. Mark, you guys are, EY, you're walking the walk, you're talking the talk. To your real estate clients, they say to you, all right, Mark, we trust you, we love you. Where do we start? What do you tell them?
Look, it's a real estate clients, but it's also Fortune 500s. We're in a unique period of time where real estate hasn't always been a C-suite initiative. Real estate, the industry is maybe 7% of GDP. There's another 93% of GDP. That's all the Fortune 500 companies, and guess what? They all have big real estate footprints. And I've seen over the years, real estate isn't always a C-suite agenda item. It is today. Virtual work, remote work, all of that is driving the C-suite saying, what are we doing? What are we doing about our people? What are we doing about how we access buildings? Do we have the right technology to manage that? And this is a unique time to implement not only technology as you think about how people are working today, but that in turn drives the technology to manage and drive your ESG strategy. They go hand in hand, and it's a great opportunity to automate. I love the comment that Stacy made about, obviously you can't manage it if you can't measure it. It's also, you have to be able to do something about it, right? This weekend, I saw it, something happened to me this week. I'll tell a story. So this weekend, someone walked up to the refrigerator, they opened the refrigerator, they walked away. And I don't know if you're one of those, and if I'm the only one on this call.
Was that my son? Was he over again? I mean,
and I'm calculating. It's 40 degrees inside. It's 72 degrees in the room. I'm calculating how fast the energy is escaping, and the reason I get really excited is I can do something about it. Close the door, right? Do we as an industry have the technology to close the door? Are we automating our buildings in a manner where we really can see that meter whirring, see that carbon meter whirring, and be able to react to it? And I think that's where we are today. And I think by driving technology in buildings, we're really going to be able to respond to the calling.
That's great. I love the analogy. It's terrific. Marta and then Michael, let's take it home by, again, I know you love both of you. You love all of your members and your clients. Are there examples that you have seen perhaps that you could reference where you're, you know, that because the audience, as you know, this industry responds to sort of FOMO. And if you could illustrate, you know, just very high level, some real good examples. Michael, you articulated a few. Marta, start with you. Could you give us some examples?
I love that because Stacy was talking so much about the value of collaboration and how folks aren't competing anymore. But I still see competition as a real good driver for getting companies moving and seeing their peers moving ahead of them. And one of the things we do within ULI and our Greenprint Center is we have this community of practice called Greenprint that is full of the world's most innovative real estate firms who are collaborating together on sustainability. And it founded back in 2009 when a handful of real estate leaders went to Greenland and saw glaciers melting, not even kidding. And so these like executives came back and said, hey, we've got to form this group to work together to drive down our carbon emissions while still creating value. Like the business case is always present. And so over the past decade plus, we've been able to collect all of these best practices of folks who started with just a goal of reducing carbon emissions and have been implementing over the past decade against that goal. I mean, it starts with benchmarking and understanding your data, as Stacy talked about, hiring someone to manage this and work across your company to get stuff done. Finding some quick wins that are the low and no cost side of things to build up your success. Move on to those capital projects to get deeper savings and drive home more value, and then move on thinking about new construction, thinking about health and wellness, thinking about resilience and net zero and everything else. So you start with those quick wins, you learn from your peers, and you follow the leaders.
Great advice. Wonderful, wonderful. I'm thinking a road trip is in our group's future, someplace like Greenland. Michael.
Sure. So I think my four colleagues here have done a terrific job of pulling it all together, the different ways. And we have the aspirational aspects that Stacy and I keep hugging about, you know, down to the transparency, right? We have the tools, prop tech tools. We have Greg and Mark here doing everything they can to make sure that the investments are made. But I just want to speak about the ROI on the tenant side. I'm in this business over 40 years. I have never seen a market that is more in the tenant's favor than right now with those tools. So the fact that we have that, and if the tenants take it seriously and insist on that in every RFP for every building, the landlords need to respond. And they just finished a year of learning that with well buildings and different other certifications because of COVID. And now this comes along as well. So if the tenants insist that they want to operate in buildings that meet these green initiatives, these ESG initiatives, the landlords will need to comply. That's the ultimate ROI.
It's so well said. It's great, Michael. I think it's definitely the tenants. I was talking earlier about the market's going to demand this happen. So it's the tenants. It's also the consumers, right? It's people that are going into these buildings that are saying, you know, health and wellness is really important to me as a human now. Like I want to know what building, you know, I'm going into, and hopefully more and more citizens also get engaged and demand that the industry responds. So I'm cautiously optimistic the industry will do the right thing itself. It always seems to do the right thing and rise to the occasion. But I think to help accelerate the change that we need here, we're going to need these external forces as well. So Bethany, that's all I got. I know you've got more questions than I've ever seen in a webinar.
I know, right? We're definitely not going to be able to get these all, folks, and we'll make sure we get answers to you offline, but we'll get to a couple of them. We've got some really great ones. I'm going to start with a question. I think, Mark, it's appropriate if you take it. And it was it was a question I had when you were talking about EY and your guys' kind of corporate initiatives. And the question's from our friend David over at Nomad Go. And he says, how do we get the different layers of organizations to buy into decarbonization? It's very clear at the executive level that this is good for financial reasons, but how do you get it all the way down? He gives the example of, the guy who actually installs and picks out the HVAC, he's going to go comfort and price over sustainability, but just in even a bigger sense, how do you get these initiatives down to the entire organization? And of course, everyone jump in too, but I think Mark is a great place for you to start.
Yeah, look, I think, we start with, first of all, the average age of our someone in our organization is in their late 20s. So we have a very young workforce, and I got to tell you, there's an incredible appetite. We've aligned with a couple upper education management schools on creating a curriculum around it where they can actually kind of get degrees. We also have internal degrees, badges of where you can get recognized for getting up to speed and educated in all sustainability related issues. And we've seen incredible take up throughout the organization, interested in it, wanting to know more. And obviously, at the same time, that's a bottoms up approach. It also takes a top down approach. Our the chairman, Carmine DeCibio, spent time at Davos, involved in many of the committees related to that, is really driving from a top down what the agenda is. So I think it's a lot of different ways, but I think that's how you make certain you get that awareness, intention, and excitement around this agenda.
Can I jump in real fast, Bethany? So I was just on a call this morning with a global concrete and cement company that's talking about how they're working on decarbonization. And I wanted them to kind of give me everything that they were doing. And one of the things that stuck out is that they're tying bonuses down the chain to actually meeting their decarbonization goals. So it's not just at the executive level, but it's the managers, and how it's now tied to their performance and what they make in terms of a bonus. And I've seen other companies in the real estate space and others now starting to do that. But that's one, and Microsoft does that too. They have an internal carbon fee for their employees and their different divisions. So that's another way. It's again, I think more of the Greg. If I'm taking that approach now, Greg, that you've been taking, it's the financial part that then makes it personal for those folks to actually deliver.
Yeah.
Marta, do you have something?
I do. The other thing is that, right, it's not necessarily within just your company, but the whole real estate sector. You've got your owners, you have your property managers, you have your facility managers, you have your tenants, and they don't all necessarily work for the same company, but they work in the same building. And so the question isn't necessarily how to get your whole company in line, it's how to get all the companies in your building aligned. And one of the things that some of our Greenprint members have done recently is some friendly competition where they'll say, all right, here are 2 buildings, we're going to measure your energy usage, and whoever has the best reductions over a 1-year period gets a pizza party and a plaque, some kind of simple award, but enough to get the entire team of folks in a building excited about some opportunities. And that way it doesn't stovepipe just with the HVAC guy or just with the leasing team, but it really is a team effort around building efficiency and carbon reductions. And that's been a fun way to do so. It's tough to scale, but it's effective.
That's great. This is another question I had, so I'm going to jump to it, and it's to Stacy. Stacy, yes, transparency data underpins this all. I'm curious, what specific data points are top of mind for you? Embodied carbon per building, climate risk data, carbon emission, and she goes on. So what are those key data points that we should be looking into?
Well, of course, with my hat gives away my main focus right now, but I've worked across the whole portfolio of sustainability impacts, and I think carbon is the large one that everyone's talking about. I'm going back to my language or dialect. So it's operational and embodied carbon emissions. The operational side, of course, is how much energy you're using. It's what we've been looking at, I think, for the longest time. The embodied emissions are the emissions of all the materials and how they're made and installed. And that's the data that we're working on making really transparent at this point. So that's kind of the carbon bucket, but there's also, I think, coming into play things that are in the ESG world, like equity and fair labor and data transparency around that. I think, water, you have to think about water, but really starting with carbon, I think, is what I'm currently seeing from a really deep dive in getting to this transparency reporting.
Thanks. Our friend Menno has a question, and it's a simple one. I like it. What can US learn from Europe?
Great question, Menno. Thanks for joining. Who's going to take that one?
What can Europe learn from the US?
Yeah, right.
Sorry. I think it goes both ways. That's my only comment. I'll share.
And if you don't know Menno's group, PropTech for Good, terrific group, great advocacy. Greg, what do you think, man? From a global perspective, what do we learn from other parts of the world?
Okay, so what is Europe getting right is that they've got good alignment across the whole capital stack here. So they've got things where, say, for example, for the capital asset allocators, the people who are providing all of the money for all of the buildings, they have regulations in place that all of those funds, every single fund in all of Europe has to report ESG goals and how they're doing on the ESG stuff. It's not just the ESG funds that have to do it. So it basically makes it top of mind for every single capital asset allocator. Right, so that's at one level, and then they're also doing the same thing for the actual real estate industry in a bunch of cities where they've got sticks. In that case, you know, we've got fines and things that happen if your buildings aren't up to code. But I think the number one thing that they're doing, which is potentially easier in Europe, is having this sort of full court press across all of the different pieces of the puzzle that touch the entire industry, where you can get cities involved, local counties involved, regulators across the asset allocators, the building owners, and even the tenants. So that's definitely something that would be fantastic if we could figure that out on the US side.
And Michael, if I could just add, you know, when you speak about Europe, a good start would be just attending the Paris Climate Accords, right? So, you know, we're coming a long way from where we were right now as we move back to more of a sense of normalcy. But, you know, working at Savills gives me the benefit of having partnerships where our headquarters operates in London, and we do see them ahead of the curve. So all kidding aside, and when you just travel in Europe, you get that general sense that there's more of a sensitivity to it. So a lot of the tenants, as well as the retail users as well, they're more sensitive to this. So we're catching up to that. You know, we spoke about earlier a lot of the things, but I think this does come down to social responsibility. And that's really what the bigger picture is here. We are fortunate. I think some people outside of the United States would say maybe spoiled here, and we're just waking up to a lot of these realities now.
Well said. Well said. Bethany, any more?
Yeah, no, a question to Michael. From the occupier's perspective, how do you get smaller, more cost-effective companies to adopt these ideals? So you had name dropped a lot of great big companies, but most people work for smaller companies.
Well, I think a few people here already spoke about the fact that within companies, I think Marta was referring to building owners and developers getting groups together. That's on their end. But social media, I mean, set up a social media site for where you work at your building and chat back and forth. Set that up. Go out for lunch into the courtyard. Go somewhere together with everyone and try to find those ways. That's the best way for small companies to do it. Industry groups is another way to do that, bringing people together. But I do think that on the flip side, the landlords, they need to find ways to attract tenants. And those smaller tenants are still very desired tenants in this marketplace right now more than ever. And again, if the landlords have workplaces that allow people to be sensitive to sustainability, I think that would be the best way for everyone to be able to, you know, walk the talk here together individually as small companies as well as big companies as well.
I would add to that a lot of times there are opportunities for landlords and end users or tenants to collaborate on green leasing, cost sharing for efficiency improvements, and thinking through other strategies to work together to have that transparency on whole building energy consumption and ways to work together towards mutual sustainability goals. So just bringing those two stakeholder groups together is another important way to move that forward, no matter how large or small the tenant is.
Yeah, and I would just add, Bethany, and thank you, Robert Cooper. We've talked a lot about office, right? But this is all real estate food groups. This is multifamily. This is for sale. This is retail. This is logistics. This is hospitality. This is across the board. So I know we talked a lot about office today because we have some big, occupiers focused on, but it's every food group in the built world is what we're talking about today.
I just one more point I think is on the tools and data side and the investment in those things. I think providing the same level of tools to the small companies where they can track and report and look into these things as the big ones, right? So the large companies can invest in creating tools for themselves that do all of these things, but there needs to be the tools that the small companies can also find accessible and not have to go find a whole bunch of money to get a license for. to really help adoption. And that's another thing that we're working on with what we're doing.
Yeah, great. Bethany, I see we're at 3.
We're at time, yeah. So, and I've saved all of the questions in chat. So final thoughts.
Thank you. So I'll just give you my final thought. I'd love to just hear everybody quickly. So to the audience that's watching us live and hopefully going to watch this on replay, there's no way we can address climate change without the built world. It's just not going to happen. And so for, am I going to be around in 2040 or 2050? I hope so. My kids are going to be, and their kids. And we have a responsibility of all of us that have worked in the built world to do something about it. But we need help. We need support. So that's what we're doing today, is to try and educate, but galvanize the industry to get involved. So you've got some incredible thought leaders here. We're going to be back again with more webinars, more conferences, more information. And all I could say is, please get involved. Please support us. Time is not on our side. So we've got to move with a great sense of urgency to mobilize this industry. So Greg, Mark, Marta, Michael, Stacy, Bethany, Lena, everybody that's been involved in this today, I can't thank you enough for all your support. And you inspire me and you give me hope. Because I think when I first started to the team and I said, I want to launch this CREtech Climate, and I knew it was going to be difficult, and all of you just jumped in and said, what can we do? And you're putting all of your time, your effort, your dollars into supporting this. So I can't thank you enough for today. It's just the beginning.